Imagine Medina in the year 624. The sun finally dips below the horizon, taking the scorching Arabian heat with it. A companion of the Prophet Muhammad raises a small wooden bowl to his lips, taking his very first sip of water after enduring the first mandatory fast of Ramadan. We know the precise prayer they recited. We know they broke their fast with dates. And we know the feeling of the dry desert air as the city began to eat. But how exactly do we possess these incredibly specific details from a 7th century event today? To understand how this survived, look at the society that preceded it. The era of Jahiliyyah, or pre-Islamic Arabia, was a vast nomadic world. Tribes roaming the desert tracked their histories through spoken poetry and blood feuds. They didn't build archives or libraries. Memory was their only record. Decades after the Prophet's passing, a silent crisis was unfolding. The companions, the Sahaba, who physically lived through the early days of Islam, were dying. Every time a witness passed away, an entire first-hand account of the faith's origin disappeared with them. The foundations of the faith relied entirely on human memory. Without a shift in how these people recorded their history, the specific events of Medina were on a trajectory to be lost to shifting sands. The intervention began with a single command. The Caliph Umar bin Abdulaziz saw the danger and ordered a prominent scholar named Ibn Shihab al-Zimi to track down the last living companions. His mission was to systematically collect and record their oral traditions before time ran out. This preservation effort required a center of operations. When the Abbasid Caliphate rose to power, they moved the capital to the banks of the Tigris River, building the city of Baghdad. Here, they established the House of Wisdom, an intellectual hub dedicated entirely to gathering global knowledge. But recording thousands of oral histories on rare, expensive animal skins was impossible. The solution arrived from a battlefield. Following a conflict with the Tang dynasty, the Abbasids captured Chinese prisoners of war who knew a closely guarded secret: the technology to manufacture paper. Suddenly, Baghdad housed massive paper mills. This abundance of cheap material allowed scholars like al-Tabari to lock fragile oral accounts into massive written chronicles. These meticulous historians recorded the exact chain of narration, cross-referencing witnesses to ensure the words captured on paper matched the original testimony. This mass production of paper allowed the history of the faith to be replicated thousands of times. It was no longer stored in a few vulnerable minds, but in a vast, decentralized collection of scrolls and books. Let's follow those chronicles back to the year 622. Look at Mecca. What was once the Prophet's home had become a deadly trap. Assassination plots were finalized, and the early Muslims were forced into a desperate escape. This migration, known as the Hijrat, was a perilous journey north toward the oasis of Yathrib. The ruling Quraysh tribe was so desperate to stop them, they placed a massive bounty on the Prophet's head, 100 camels for his capture. Bounty hunters flooded the desert. One of them, Suraka bin Malik, spotted his target and spurred his horse forward. But as Suraka closed in, the chronicles record that his horse's legs repeatedly sank deep into the sand, making pursuit impossible. Suraka eventually abandoned the chase, convinced the Prophet was under divine protection. Escaping the reach of the Quraysh, the travelers finally arrived in Yathrib. The local tribes welcomed them, and the settlement was given a new name, Medina, the city of the Prophet. The Hijrat turned a group of hunted fugitives into a community with a sovereign home. For the first time, they were no longer surviving in secret. They were in a position to establish their own laws and social structures. Inside Medina's walls, the local residents, the Ansar, formed a pact of brotherhood with the refugees. They split their wealth, their homes, and their land with people who had arrived with nothing, creating a society built on shared responsibility. With the community stabilized, the second year after the Hijrat brought a new command. It was the order to fast for an entire month, the month in which the Quran was first revealed, the month of Ramadan. The early Muslims navigated strict new logistics. They watched the horizon for the thin sliver of the crescent moon to mark the month's start. In the dark before dawn, families shared a simple meal, often just a few dates and water, to prepare for the day. Once the sun rose, the toll was brutal. In the middle of the Arabian desert, men and women labored in date orchards and markets, enduring scorching temperatures without a single drop of water. This wasn't just a dietary change, it was a grueling physical test. By enduring a month of shared hunger, the community forged a level of patience and collective discipline that would define their society. When the sun finally set on that first fast, the scene was a departure from the history of blood feuds. Men who once belonged to warring tribes sat shoulder to shoulder, breaking the fast together. This shared meal became a physical demonstration of the communal patience they had just spent 30 days building. This social resilience would eventually meet a terrifying test in the 13th century. Hulagu Khan and his Mongol army swept into the heart of the Islamic world, breaching the walls of Baghdad. The invaders destroyed the House of Wisdom. They took centuries of manuscripts and threw them into the Tigris River. The historical accounts note the river literally ran black for days, stained by the ink of countless drowning books. The written archive suffered another massive blow centuries later. While Europe embraced the printing press, the Ottoman Empire initially banned the machine for 300 years, severely limiting their ability to mass-produce and protect their historical records. Yet, despite the Mongol fires and the rejection of the press, the history survived. The works of scholars like Al-Tabari lived on because thousands of hand-copied versions had already been carried and stored by individuals across the empire. The discipline of the first Ramadan created a community that could survive physical hardship, and the labor of the Golden Age scholars created a record that could survive the destruction of a library. The history of the faith didn't survive in one place. It survived because it was written and shared by many.